Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to Mother and Daughter Podcast. And my name is Sierra Fulcher.
And I'm Jacqueline Houston.
Today we have a special interview with a special guest. We
Yes.
have an award-winning author named Anne-Marie Oomen.
Yes.
And we'll be doing an interview with her about her book, and it's called As Long as I Know You. We're excited to do this
Yes, we
interview.
are.
It's truly a blessing to do, and we're excited to just dive
Dive
into
into
it.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Yes.
such a good book. It's a really good book
It is.
concerning a mother and daughter dynamic. It's really good. So we're gonna bring her in. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Sarah, I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm really honored, and I love your title, Mother Daughter in Ministries. It's just right. Thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Thank you.
So we're gonna get into this interview. First, I'm gonna show the book. This is the book, Anne-Marie. As Long as I Know You by Anne-Marie Oomen.
Yes, and you can go and order it and make sure.
And we're
Yes.
gonna give you everything afterwards. But this book, truly, honestly, it's a good book. It's
is.
really good.
We enjoyed it.
We read it for
Oh.
hours. Like just in
you.
one moment, we were just reading, and I enjoy. I love your writing.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. That's so affirming. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Even with the titles, they were it's like it fit just perfect.
It did. It did.
Yes.
I loved it. It was good.
Chapter titles are a lot of fun, I have to say.
They are. They are. So we're gonna get into it, and then we'll talk a little afterwards. And
Okay.
have some fun. So, okay. So our first question: what 3 things inspired you to write the book?
Such a good question, and to make a book, you have to make a pretty big commitment. So it is an important question. My father died in 2010, and we realized, and this often happens, that in a couple, especially a couple that have been married as they were over 60 years, that one was masking the other's decline. And when my father passed, we realized very quickly that she was not only physically frail, but the beginnings of the dementia were in place. And I say this in the first chapter, I had not been a good daughter. We had been at loggerheads. My mother and I we're in personality, we are similar. In the way we like to operate in life, we are very different. And so I needed to write this book as a way of documenting what became a journey of reconciliation. You can grow up, we all know this, we can grow up in loving, deeply committed spiritual families and still not be able to find each other. And that was the case with us. And we were we'd always had a volatile relationship, and we were not friends. And I knew that when my father died, and I also knew I was going to have to step up, and my siblings were going to have to step up in some way. And we were scattered, so it was going to be a really big challenge. But I wanted more than anything to understand what had happened between us, why it had happened. And for me, because I'm a writer, the only real internal tool that I had to do that was by writing into and through it. So that was the motivation for really getting it started. I wanted to better understand us. And, it was a long and spiritual and fraught journey. As mothers and daughters. But it oddly enough, and this is haunting to say, that in the process of losing her, we found each other. I mean, for one thing, she forgot a lot of the stuff that I had done. So there was that. But we also found finally a meeting ground, a rapport that we could quietly build on. So those are the reasons. Yeah, that's kind of a long story.
I like that. Yeah,
I do too. I like that. That's really good. Because even with what you're saying, I didn't get a chance. My mother passed when I was young. I was very young, so I didn't get a chance to even get a relationship with her. But the person that raised me, we was good. But there, like you said, it's still sometimes you have that odd, but you love each other, but you have that, that odd.
Yeah. You and I think whoever raises you up, the person who feeds you breakfast, wipes your butt, the whole thing,
Yeah.
those people are essentials, even if they're not blood tie.
Yeah.
That's so
they're mothering in a different way.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's very true.
That is so true.
And I like what you said when you said about that it was like a healing thing when you wrote it.
Yeah.
I can agree with that. For me, like when I write, it's like a healing thing.
Isn't it interesting how just having to put it on the page and then to read through it, you find yourself discovering things that you didn't know you knew. That's what I meant.
That's so true.
And that is true.
Which and also I think writing it gives you the opportunity, you put and I was doing this because I started writing this as we were going through this long and difficult process of how to care for her and how to keep her safe. But so I started writing little snippets right along, even I've written 3 memoirs about growing up on a farm, being, working in the fields, that whole rural America. So difficult to understand.
Yeah.
But I for this book I wasn't working from memory so much. I was working from the moment. So I was writing down snippets of what happened or just summaries of what happened between us almost, as soon as I could get to a notebook.
Like
after I left her, visiting her, whatever the situation was. And I found that when I went back and I started to understand what had happened between us, I could make those snippets contain more meaning than just what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I could find out the emotional underpinnings of what happened. So,
that's good.
That is.
Very good.
It was a long process, though, and not easy, as you know.
Yes, I can believe it. Yes.
So in the chapter Tea Leaves, you began to retrace memories of your mother's past. In retrospect, do you feel you have a sense of why your mom may have behaved the way she did towards you?
I do. And that was another thing. I knew a lot of those stories, but I also began to research her life, going back through paperwork and old letters that some of them I could find, and realized that her story was fraught. She was born very shortly after World War I, and in a rural community, raised on a farm. Same, and her father had fought in World War I. And the family story, if I can share it without it being a spoiler, what comes down to us is that he was the 11th child and his mother died shortly after his birth.
Oh, wow.
He was wet nursed by an older sister. And those stories, I think there's trauma, then he comes to this country. He's an immigrant. He has that whole experience.
Yeah.
And then he also makes an effort to be an American, whatever that means. term. And he goes back to fight in World War I, where I believe he had trauma. And that's the beginning, I think, of her trauma. There was never a completely secure love in her life.
Oh, wow.
She was in poverty for much of her early adulthood. There were fires in the family where they lost the house, and there was trauma, I think, due to the growing alcoholism in his life.
Yeah.
So I believe now that she had anxiety issues, perhaps some trauma or PTSD, and because of that, she was hypercritical. Her life was filled with fears that she could not articulate, and she was way too proud to ask for help.
Oh, wow.
So it's like that complex of situations that led her to be hypercritical, hypersensitive, hyper fearful for her daughters. And as an oldest daughter, I was the first one, that added more to I think her expectations and her fears for me.
Oh, okay.
I like that, like how you said that. I feel like our past really do reflect us and who we become, how much we allow it to, like you said. And that's something that even for me, like I had to retrace things in my past to kind of shift and change the way I would become, like even as a mother or just as an individual.
Oh, that is so important. I think it's one thing to say, oh, I'm like this because these things came down to me.
Yeah.
But then to acknowledge that it's our responsibility to say, can I change this? Can I alter? Can I shift the direction of this trauma that's come skyrocketing down from the past?
Yes.
And that's the real journey, I think.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
So it's such
I really like that chapter. That was like one of my favorite chapters because I like how you described it. Like it's like fragile. It's very fragile.
Yeah.
Retracing your past, retracing the things that really scarred you. And I feel like that was a thing of her. Like her past was a thing that scarred her to be how she was towards you all.
Yeah. Super, super overprotective, critical, all those things that as a child, you're just kind of going, what is this all about? Why can't I do anything right? As an adult, this book gave me the opportunity to go back and go, oh, here we go. This is why it happened. And to then explore, difficult as it was, what it meant to forgive and to rebuild.
Yes.
Even in the face of dementia, which is where it gets kind of funny,
Yeah. And I love that too, because I think that would help a lot of people, especially women in those areas where if we could just go back and look at our past and know that I can get through this, I can come through this, it doesn't have to be this way. And that it's really like, oh my gosh, this is really helping, because I believe that's what I had to do, kind of go back in my past and forgive different ones and see my life in a different way. I didn't want to be the way that I seen things. And this is and just how you're saying, just through your writing, it really helps. I wrote a book, and it is like through that it began to heal me with certain things. It began to heal me, and I think that's what kind of pushed even more to let's do mother and daughter, because I want to see the healing of women. And I know men can go through it too, but today we're talking about the mother and the daughter. So, and I would love to see more mothers and daughters see that healing and get that healing that they need.
Right. We're after all, we're womb partners,
Yeah.
And and I think it's so easy to say, well, that's just who my mother is, and not to explore the ways in which we could find the possibility of transformation.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and Jackie, congratulations on writing your book. That's just
Thank you.
really a powerful thing to have done. And thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so number 3. How would you describe the relationship you had with your mother in detail?
Well, I think I've kind of maybe said a little bit about it. It was fraught with volatility. She was a mother of no because she was overprotective and hypersensitive to the shame factor in her life. I mean, to bring shame on the family was the worst possible thing that anyone could do. And she was hypersensitive to it, in part because she was an adult daughter of an alcoholic, and in part because she was extremely sensitive to poverty, into the poverty that she grew up in. And she had kind of dragged herself out of it in the way that many people did post World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was all part of that. But the real essence is that she was a mother of no, and I was a child of will. I mean, I know now, looking back, that even though we have similar sensitivities, our way, as I said, of operating in the world was so different. She wanted to be like everyone else. She wanted us all to be, members of our church particularly. We absolutely stalwart, stand up, stick to the rules people. And sin was real for her, and shame was real for her, and evil was real for her. And I was a child of will. I had those same sensitivities, but I wanted to go out into the world. I wanted to take risks. I wanted to be, I'm sorry to say now, I often wanted to be in danger because it felt thrilling to me, and that was a kick,
You know what? Your book and that part that you're talking about when we was reading, that was today. I just broke down and I started crying because I found myself being your mother.
Oh yeah,
I really did, because I have a child that is he's a he though, and he loved to explore. And when I say no, his answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I literally broke down when I read that part of your book.
Yeah. Oh.
I had to say, help me, because it's just a covering or protection, or like you say, the shame, or you just don't want that to be on your family. And I just wanted to cover. I guess just don't want so I don't want him to go out. And I was like,
it does. I think the fear is that it paralyzes us sometimes. And we don't feel like, I think she felt like she didn't know what to do, and all she could do is grab on and say, no, you can't do that. And it was a time too when there was just not a lot of support for mothers who had willful children, or who had a child who wanted to go out and about and be in that world where there was likely danger. And there just wasn't a lot. I mean, she did try, I think, because she put me in, and she became a 4-H leader. In rural communities, 4-H clubs were really big, but she didn't let me do the things like ride horses, which would have been ideal. But she wanted me to learn to sew, because that was the appropriate thing. Of course, you know how that went. Yeah. So it was like that. So yeah. So I think that her, it was because I was a child of will. Yeah.
Wow.
So do you look at your childhood in a new light now that you have been through the journey of reflecting of your memories?
Oh yeah. I think I'm grateful for the time at the end of her life that we had, because well, I don't know if we'll ever make up for lost time completely, but I saw then how within the parameters that she was given, the sort of spiritual parameters that she was given, that she gave herself
Mm-hmm.
as a woman of, a real church-going person, a really devout person of faith. Within the parameters that she could give herself, she tried really hard to bring some richness to our lives. She had 5 kids, and then they took in foster kids too from Catholic Charities. And so, a dinner table when I was growing up was chaos. There were a lot of people there, and there were animals under the table, and there were hired hands at the table, and so it was an enormous responsibility that she had in running that household.
I can believe
and was trying to feed everybody and also go to the fields. Because we were all going to the fields. So anyway,
Yeah.
when I think about it now, I think she needed help.
Yeah.
And she couldn't ask for help no more. And then she was trying to give us some enrichment. So
Yeah. And I can imagine that, because now it's so different, where now you can really get help, but back then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, thanks for
And
that.
I can believe that, like the weight of everything that can really take a toll on you mentally.
I think I think it did. Yes, that was really perceptive. Yeah.
believe that. Okay, so in the chapter, Anne and Elizabeth, you talked about seeing another adult daughter love her elder mother better than you imagined. What do you mean by that, and what made you feel that way?
Oh my gosh. Well, in this scene, and again, I don't think it's a spoiler, but in the scene, I'm in the hallway at the manor at the assisted living where my mother is staying now, and another elderly woman is with her daughter, and she doesn't know her daughter, and she keeps asking, who who are you? Who are you? Which is heartbreaking, that moment when your mother doesn't know you. That is just an awful moment for everybody. But this daughter, her name was Anne too, or Anne without the Marie. And she understood and saw into that moment that this wasn't about her mother not knowing her. It was about her mother not knowing herself anymore.
Wow.
And she answers back to her mother's question, who are you? She answers back, you're Elizabeth. You're Elizabeth.
Wow.
And calms that woman so perfectly. And I just, she didn't answer the question her mother was asking. She answered the question that was inside her mother's loss. Her dementia and her loss of self, and she placed her name back into the conversation, into the air.
Wow.
And for me, that was a model that I had missed. I'm going to tear up here. A model that I had totally missed in the whole process of trying to refine my mother. That my job might not be answering her questions, but it might be saying more to who she was to herself. And being a channel to keep her identity in place rather than a barrier. So, and that that took a long time, but that moment, that is such a small but pivotal chapter.
It is.
That where I can identify what's really happening between us. Yeah.
Man, that's
Wow.
amazing.
That is.
I can't even imagine,
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you noticed this, but their names really were Elizabeth and Anne.
It wasn't.
And I thought,
wow.
it's a little too uncanny.
Wow.
This is one of those swords to the heart,
Yeah.
Pay attention to this girl.
Man,
So,
Wow, that is
amazing.
very amazing. Wow. Ah,
Wow.
So,
Man, that's
yeah.
amazing. Okay, so what was the hardest part of making the decision not to bring your mother into your home?
I don't know if that will ever be fully resolved in my heart of hearts. My mother, as you know from reading the book, had cared for her own mother in our home.
mhm.
Yeah.
And so we had 3 and sometimes 4 generations in our little farmhouse. Well, it was a big sprawling farmhouse, but it was a mess. And she, I think, was. Well, I lost the track of the question. Just say the question again.
So what was the hardest
Oh,
part?
yes, the hardest part. Excuse me. Yeah, I had an image of the house entered my head. Totally distracted. Somebody better clean this place up. The hardest part of that was that she had cared for these people, and so she kind of made her little bargain with God. She'd care for these people, and somebody would care for her. She had no concept of how reliant in this country families are on the 2-person income. What families do we know anymore where both partners aren't working?
Yeah.
And often other family members are
Yeah.
working to make ends meet, to keep a home in place. And so we couldn't figure out who would quit their job.
Yeah.
Which home would she stay in? Could we rotate, and how would that affect our lives? And it was just an impossible situation, which will always haunt me, because I think she would have first liked to stay in her own home, except that she kept firing the people we hired to help her.
Yeah.
That's another example of her will and her stubbornness. And then when we finally did figure out how to find a place for her, she didn't. I kept hoping she would find community and she would have community, because there was a lot of opportunity for religion and to keep going and keep being a part of a community in that way too. But she just at that point couldn't adapt anymore, so she was unhappy. We did our best, I think, to be with her through that journey, but that's going to stay with me. It wasn't a simple thing.
Yeah. And I can that goes back to, I can imagine that, because when my husband, his grandmother, that's what you thought of. Yeah, she was living on her own. Her husband had passed. He had dementia, and then she was living on her own, and so she had to go and live with her daughter. And that was the hardest, I think, for her, to go and live with her daughter, and her daughter was taking care of her. And she would fuss, and she would just, she would give the flux, which, and my husband's mother never put her in a nursing home or anything, but she was so unhappy. You could tell she was just unhappy. She hadn't even got to the point where she didn't even want to get out of bed, or and so I can't, it's like that your story relates so much. And eventually she passed away.
Yeah.
Because I think it was because of her sadness, because she was getting, but it was just, she didn't, and like she came from that, the older, that you take care of yourself, you do this, and you take care of your children, not your children taking care of you. So you think, but sometimes things just happen.
Yeah, I think it's
I think sometimes when the journey, I think of that part of the journey as having kind of gone wrong, but I also think of that challenged us to really try to make the time that we had together more meaningful. And it'll never make up for the fact that we couldn't take her into one of us couldn't take her into our, and also there are like 24 grandkids around now. So, so I mean, the family is fertile, let me tell you. So there was that part of it too, is that there were responsibilities. And I think you're right. Jackie, you're so right. In a time past, there would have been no question. Grandma would have come, great grandma would have come, and there would have been a room somewhere. But in this world where we are so obligated to work and these incomes, and we have bills, and the cost of living is so high, I feel so much for young people right now. You know, I've had a career and I've got more flexibility now, but not when that was all happening. And younger people, it's even worse. They have more.
It sure is.
They have a harder journey.
I agree. It really is. Both of like the story of your mother and then my grandmother. I kind of really thought like I seen the similarities with her, because before she moved with my grandmother, she lived on her own and she fired different ones that worked. In the story where you talked about your niece living with her, and that was funny because I remember cousins living with my great grandmother, taking care of her, and it was like they can't do it.
What have you done? What have you done to me?
She would chase them away. She would.
They
didn't want to be taken.
And I suspect we will be just as cranky.
I think it's like the hardest thing as a woman is like losing yourself, losing that thing of being able, like you both said, taking care of yourself, having that power of caring for yourself, and then you're losing it. It's like, I can imagine that's a big thing, you know.
I think you are so right. It's that we are as mothers, we're in a position of authority, and we have and especially because it starts out with the ultimate authority. Those little babies are just totally reliant on your caretaking, your life, your that you are paying attention to all the details, and so you have that sense of empowerment. Although I think many of us are insecure with it, but as that fades and children become, as you say, independent, then that whole thing shifts. So
it does.
That's so true. Okay. So in the chapter Quarter Windows, you talked about the difference in the relationship between your brothers and your mom as opposed to your sisters and your mom. Why do you believe she treated the boys differently than the girls?
I'm just going to be real blunt here. Sometimes I think she just liked them better.
Oh my gosh.
But I also think there's some unrecognized and inherent sexism in her generation, and that was part of it too. Her boys were going to carry on the farm. They were going to receive land eventually in some way or another, and and her girls, she wanted them to be. She really wanted us to live in our rural communities and be respected wives, and did not always understand that especially in the 70s and 80s, that things were really changing with women coming into their own, and women farmers taking their place among people who were trying to create food, and that was just unheard of at the time. And so I think her boys were, for her, they were more the future of this legacy that she was a part of, that she believed she was a part of, and also that her girls needed to be supporters for those kind of men. And so it was a narrower view. Yeah, I think I know that my brothers have changed a lot because both of them have daughters and now women in their lives who are real stand-up people, and they aren't tolerating that. So I think that's going to be a changed world. But in her time, it was what it was. I don't fault her. I just know that was the truth.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Yeah. So
I think that's the similarity even with my great grandmother. It was the same thing.
Yeah, she did.
She loved the boys, even grandboys, like the grandsons. She loved them over the girls.
And she would flat out say it. I love my boys.
Yeah.
She did.
They're just
Well,
and maybe in that time that was what was necessary. I don't know. I want to be.
That's so true.
I want to be forgiving about it, even though I've had a couple of tough conversations with my brothers. I had one conversation after I always send my manuscripts to my family before they're published, so that if there's anything that I've gotten totally wrong, you can say something and either correct me or I can address it in some way. And when I sent it to my brother Tom, the last conversation that we had about it was that he said, I honestly didn't know how differently she was treating you from the way she was treating us.
Wow.
And it was an insight to him. And that was a real moment between us. Wow. You're finally seeing it. And it was good for us.
Yeah. I can believe that. Yeah. I really can believe that. Because a lot of times as siblings, you have a perception, your own perception of your parent, not knowing, what perception your sibling have. And a lot of times you don't talk to your sibling to see like, well, how do you feel about, so you don't really know. And then when you do, it's like, man, you can connect even more.
Yes. Yes. And you find that discovering that brought me closer to him. For him to say that, it was a compassion.
That's good.
Yeah.
That is good. Wow. And it seemed like it even brought more healing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I agree. Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, you can go.
For me, especially, it was healing because he saw what he couldn't see before because I had written through it, and he recognized it. If he had denied it, that would have been a whole different thing. But he recognized it.
Yeah. That's good.
And I agree, like you said, even with the old times, I do feel like that was something that was put in the women to more so value the boys over the girls, where now it is different.
Oh, yeah.
Like mothers are learning to value their girls as well, because I feel like that's important as well. The girls just as much as the boys,
And in the out of the family, in the world, girls are now women. We have to take positions of power.
We do.
We have.
do.
It's not our job just to take care of the family. It is our job to also care of, to participate in the income and shelter and in all of it.
Yes,
so true.
It is.
That is very true.
Yeah,
I definitely agree.
Yeah. So we have to raise brave, bold girls now.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Yes.
I really value that. I think that's one thing that we liked about Mother and Daughter was that our thing was empowering women to know that you can be bold, you can be strong, you can, do what you desire to do. That thing that is in your heart, you can become that thing. You can't, don't let people or circumstances make you feel like you can't.
Bravo. Thank you. Yeah. Can we just make a big sign that says all of that, Sierra? That's exactly right.
Yes.
Okay, so due to none of her children taking her in, do you think your mother may have felt any pain or hurt through the entire time of being at the manor before her dementia got worse?
I do. I mean, you read the book. She often would ask, and then she would be disappointed. And even though
Mhm.
we came as much as we could, I was driving 2 hours once a week at least, and my sister was there twice a week. Still, I think she felt lonely, and she did not readily make friends
Yeah.
in that time of her life. So yeah, I take that on. I take that. It. I think there was pain in her life and loss, and if we could have figured out, it's that really complicated balance. If I take her into my home, or if we quit jobs,
Mm-hmm.
the family in a different way. We take time from children who are also in the picture. We take time from spouses that we've made a commitment to, or partners that we're with. And all of that becomes a complicated situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's totally, I, 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 I hope I don't get too political here, but I think it's totally, our health system is in such a difficult place right now.
Mm-hmm.
There is no clear means by which families can get help, so that she, one, either could have stayed in her home
Yeah.
in a way that would have been acceptable to her, or come to one of our homes, but not had the situation where we would have had to quit jobs and
Right.
and threaten the household.
Yeah.
So it's one of those horrible situations that if there was better health care, better geriatric
Yes.
services,
That's so true.
better support for
Yes.
families, we can continue then to be tax-paying citizens.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
so true.
So what's wrong with that math?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is very
That's
true.
true.
So I'm not trying to place blame outside of
No.
myself, because
No.
I take on what is my
No.
responsibility. But I also know that if the systems were in place, we would have found different channels.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I believe that.
I like I said, your book is so touching, and it's like it really hits home, because I'm a mother that take care. I have a sick son.
Mm.
And so my husband has to work and to get the care that I desire for him, so won't
Mhm.
nobody abuse him. I stay at home and my
Oh,
husband
bless you.
work, you
Thank
know.
you.
Um, like you said, if it was better, which I don't want to get off, like you said, into all of that, but if it was better, medical help and things, it could be a difference.
Right. There would be different ways to manage it. And I feel
Yeah.
like in a country with so many creative people,
Yeah.
why aren't we putting that creativity into some things like
Absolutely.
that?
Yes.
Creating more
Yes.
paperwork and bureaucracy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so
Yes.
true. I agree.
Okay, I will be careful. I will.
No, it's just your book. Actually, it hits a lot of spots in a
It
lot of
does.
different places,
It
and
does.
if people really read your book, it is going to hit home
Yes.
somewhere. It's going to hit home.
Oh, that would make me happy, but it would also, you know what? I think it would make my mother happy.
Yeah.
It would do the kind of good that would make her situation less fraught, less
Yeah.
difficult.
Yes.
That would be a worthy
Yeah.
effort. Yeah. Thank you. That's a thanks for that.
Yeah. And I believe it would. I know it's a help and a blessing.
Yeah, and I just want to say I am so grateful when I hear stories that you and your husband, your partner, have worked it out so that you can care for your loved one. That to me is just priceless. My accolades to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so now looking back at everything, do you see any parallels between you and your mother? Or do you regret any decisions you made concerning your mother?
Well, yeah, I regret that we weren't clever enough and we didn't have enough support around us
Yeah.
to really make her final years a little easier. I mean, that's a real regret, as I said before. But I think uh, we might have had different decisions if my brothers had been a little bit more on board. You know, unfortunately, it was a time when their wives were also dealing with elder care, so they couldn't step forward in the way. So that left the three daughters, one who lives in Colorado, and of course, so it was Mary Jo, my sister Mary Jo, and me who ended up making most of the decisions. And yeah, there will always be a remorse about some of that.
Yeah.
But also, I'm just going to say I know we're all old enough. I can say this. Life is complicated. And, this idea that there's this pure happy ending, I don't believe in that anymore. I think there are complicated endings where there are some beautiful things that happen and there are some really hard things that happen. And part of our strength in our spirituality is understanding that in going through the really hard things and trying to forgive each other and forgive ourselves, that we grow in quiet ways.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the grief or the remorse that I feel is ever going to go away, but it's going to become, and has already in some ways become, more companionable.
Yeah.
And it's become a tool through which I can see the world and assess my own future decisions
Yeah.
a little better. And it's brought me, as I said, mother-daughter relationships are a fraught divinity, I think that contradiction kind of is what we mean when we're trying to accept ourselves, even in our flawed decisions.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true.
And that is true.
And I don't mean that. I mean, I don't have any real wisdom on this. I just trying to make it so that I can live with myself and also grow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's good.
It is.
I just would like to encourage you. I believe that your mother would be very happy because it's really exploring and is expressing and is showing other women that may be going through even now what she went through, that it can help them even now. So I just want to encourage you. You did a wonderful job, even with writing the book and how you explained everything and you broke it down. I think you did as plain as you could do. It's just, it's good. It's good. It's helping me as a mother to understand that whatever happened in my days, to be, more concerned even with what my children's might think or what they might feel because they married and have children. And so it's your book is really a big help. And your mother, I think, would be so happy and just I do.
I had been with the end of it took me almost 7 years to complete it, and at the end I was kind of blocked, as writers often are, but I was really blocked. I didn't want it to end with her death. And then of course COVID hit and she died, likely of COVID. We'll never know quite for sure, but I felt when through that grief, it was, and your words, Jackie, made me think of this. I felt like she was pushing me.
Wow.
Like there was this deadline for the contest, for the award, and I didn't have a prayer and really at all that that would be chosen.
Uh-huh.
What I knew was that I was being really pushed to complete that manuscript so that I could find a transformation for the grief. So it was part of my grief process, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Was going back, looking at the chapters, reconsidering, I was thinking of her all the time, and it's like she's just right on my shoulder, going, "Come on, get going," you know.
Yeah.
Get off your fanny.
Oh,
So, and what you're saying rings true to me. Thank you, and I really, really appreciate that. And I do hope it helps people. I don't, I don't have illusions, but I do really hope it does some good in the world.
yeah.
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 And that actually goes into the last question, which is, what is one thing you hope readers take away from your story and why?
Well, first of all, that if you have a fraught relationship with your mother, there's hope, you know.
Yeah.
And that there are ways to work through it. I mean, there's on a emotional level, I think we need as daughters, I think, especially if you've had a difficult relationship with your mother, moments of listening, I think,
Mhm.
are really helpful. When I shut off my objection voice, the voice that was always defiant
Yeah.
or rebellious or was saying, "I'm going here. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm leaving," or whatever it was. Um, toning that down enough to hear the worry. I think it's really important, and this was part of the journey too, to know your moms and your dads or whoever raises you up,
Yeah.
to know their story, to really know who they are, and to know those things about their childhood, that my mother survived 2 major fires,
Yeah.
or that that she survived a childhood with a man who had alcoholism, and I think those, really knowing that story helps us find places.
It does.
On a practical level, I'm acutely aware now, and I say this a lot, please find out where the paperwork is. No,
That's true.
find out, is there a will?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
That's true.
is there any, are there funds available?
Yeah.
Is your dad eligible for survivorship for military benefits of any sort? All those technical questions that will come down to you
Wow.
are if you can find that stuff out before you have to go filing through papers in a basement,
Yeah.
that would have saved us so much anxiety. And also understanding things like how Medicare and Medicaid work, and those practical things like that were things that just floored me. I
Wow.
and I just didn't have any sense of how to do it, and we ended up
Mhm.
having to get lots of help and go through lots of worry. So the practical element, but the listening space and making space for your mother's story, that I think is the emotional and the spiritual side of it that is necessary for all of us to keep growing.
Yes, it
I
is.
agree.
I agree.
I enjoyed the book, like she said. It was very, very good. Like you did a wonderful job with it. It is me
Mhm.
being a young mother, it's like it's a lot I can take from it. Where raising, because my oldest is a daughter, is a girl.
Oh,
And I know there's moments where I can be hard on her, and it had me reflecting, like, I don't want to be so hard where I'm like, as a mom, I feel like I want to see the best in her. I want to see the best come out of her. So it's like, I think I apply pressure on her, but I don't want that pressure to run her away. So even when I was reading your story, it was like really touching me, like, man, you do see so much in your daughters, because it's like you see that strength, you see that power, you see all of that. And sometimes you can put so much pressure so that it makes them run away or distance themselves or feel misunderstood. So I feel like it had me reflecting,
Yeah, I remember my sister was with her daughter, my sister, uh, and I was watching her mother her daughter, and she kept saying, "You look so pretty today. You look so lovely, and look at you. You can run so fast." And I remember I had this moment of real tearfulness because it would have been the opposite statement from our mother. It would have been, you could use a haircut, and or don't spend so much time in front of that mirror, and don't run so fast. And this again comes from that the anxiety and fears and shame and all of that she had embedded in her life that I now understand.
Yeah.
Because I know more of her story.
Yeah.
But to see my sister mother in a different way, and that's what you're talking about, Sierra, I think, is just that, being affirming of their power rather than and of their beauty.
Yeah.
That is such, it's a hard lesson because I think
It
we just
is.
worry about them, and we know the world is fraught with terror.
Yes.
That's so true.
Yes, it is.
I really enjoyed this interview.
I did.
Thank you. You two have been the best.
Thank you.
I just want to say this, and I hope I don't offend anybody that I've done a podcast with before. You have been just so affirming, honestly.
Aww,
thank you.
To have a conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a blessing.
It is.
And I hope this I hope this is an absolute magnificent success for you, because it's so important. This relationship can change the world. Mothers and daughters can change the world. I really believe.
I agree.
I agree.
I believe that.
I agree. But I wanted to ask the question. Because as we were sitting here talking, it's like, I feel like your book is something that can teach. You can use the book to teach from it. And I would love to just use your book, and as we do different things, to teach from your book, so it can help where the mother might be, making a mistake or doing something, or the daughter, or, I believe the book is really a good teaching book.
Yeah.
A good teaching.
Wow. Thank you. I just hadn't, that wasn't on my radar. I would be honored, Jackie, if you would ever want to use it for anything like that,
Okay.
And I think it would make my mom happy. Well, it's out there doing some good after all. So, thank you. That I would be honored, truly, and it has been an honor to meet both of you.
It's been an honor to meet you too. Thank you. Thank you.
So let us not be strangers.
Okay. We will.
All the goodness of the Lord.
Yes, it is.
Yes, I'm so grateful. And for different ones that are watching, listening as well to our podcast, make sure you check her book out. We will definitely showcase this again. But as long as I know you, this book is truly, it's a good book. And if you want to follow her as well, she has many different platforms. So her website, you can find her at Anne-Marie-Oomen.com. You can also find her on Facebook, her personal page, which is Anne-Marie.Oomen. And then you can find her business page, and it's all capital, Anne-Marie Oomen, author. And that's all capital, everything caps. And then she's also on Twitter. Sorry, guys. She's also on Twitter, and you can find it at Oomen_Anne. And then for Instagram, it's Anne-Marie Oomen on Instagram. So
you got all of that right. That's I can't even keep track of it.
Oh, that is too funny. So make sure, guys, you follow her. Make sure you get her book. I can't even express how well written it is. I love how descriptive it is. That's like my favorite part. Along with everything else to take away from it, I love how descriptive, being a writer, like you said, it's a lot of things like imagery that you use that just was like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, I like that. Like even the McDonald's chapter, like I liked how you brought that out in the story. You know, it's like you use something simple to kind of bring out the story more. Or even like the melons, how you was talking about cutting into that and how you was digging deeper into your past or your mother. I like that so much.
Well, you know, food is a big part of farm families. I mean,
And that's true.
if you're not feeding a slew of people, something's wrong.
Yeah.
She kept buying for the average family of 40 after she left. You know?
Oh, man, that's amazing.
Oh, no, it wasn't 40. But,
this is really amazing, like she said. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
And you folks are amazing too. This is a brilliant idea, and I wish you all the success. My goodness.
Thank you.
You as
Thank
well.
you. You too.
Truly. And I wanted to give you the space as well, like if you have other projects that you're working on, to kind of announce, to tell people about your new books or even past books that you would like to talk about.
Oh, what a sweet thing. Thank you. I have 3 previous memoirs, a childhood memoir called Pulling Down the Barn, and then about my education. I'm one of the youngest people I know who has been actually attended a one-room schoolhouse. And so I had a lot of different educational experiences, including, I thought for a while, you know, my family were devout Catholics. And I thought for a short time that part of the reason I didn't fit, because in those big farm families, there was always someone for God, you know. I thought for a while that my calling was to be a nun. And I went to a convent at a very young age for a year to test that out. And of course, it utterly failed. And I was not nun material. And so that's explained in Pulling Down the Barn and House of Fields. Those are 2 of the memoirs. And then there's a memoir called Love, Sex, and 4-H, which is about growing up in the 60s and being my mother. I was 10 years in 4-H club, learning how to sew, learning how to, you know, I was in that whole track of being the good girl, or trying to be. I was never really successful. And that set against the 60s and 70s, which was of course this breakthrough for women, a lot more sexual freedom, growing up with those 2 things sitting side by side and the tension that creates. So it's called Love, Sex, and 4-H. It's a title that's a little sly. Like there's like maybe 2 kisses in it. There's not a lot of sex. Everybody probably quit going to buy it right there. So anyway, and then I have a collection of essays called An American Map, which is about traveling, finally having enough time and enough security in my life to do some traveling and actually trying to see some of this immense country. So that's a collection of essays based on travel.
Wow, that's cool.
That's good.
Thank you.
That needs some more of the books.
I know. I seen too that you're a playwright as well. Would you like to kind of talk about that?
Well, I loved doing theater. I love writing dialogue. I love hearing voices. People come alive. Like your voices are so alive in my head right now. It's a real pleasure. And I also was in a situation teaching at Interlochen Arts Academy where I was teaching playwriting. And I've done several plays inspired by the history of Michigan, particularly the history of women who, and I think probably the most well-known play is a play called Wives of an American King, in which, I don't know if you know, there was a splinter group from the Mormons that ended up settling on Beaver Island in Lake Michigan. And that splinter group was headed by a man named James Jesse Strang, who actually did the unthinkable and crowned himself king. He split from Joseph Smith first because he defied polygamy, but then, and this is some of the vagaries of our 19 and 1800 spirituality, he was told by God that polygamy might be okay, and he ended up taking 5 wives. The play I wrote is in the voice of those 5 women.
Wow.
And what that meant.
Oh.
And so the 5 women, of course, at times in their lives are living with each other or near each other and with him. And so I thought, to heck with him. I want to know what those 5 women were experiencing.
Yeah.
As all of them were bearing children.
Yes.
And so that's probably the play that has the most significance.
Wow.
And then I'm always interested in people who are in circumstances that they didn't anticipate, that are no fault of their own, but they're hard things, you know. Yeah. So there's a play called The Secrets of Loose Talk Tavern, which is about in the Upper Peninsula, remote bar where, you know, rural communities gather, and there's some toughness there that you got to contend with. And what happens if you're the only woman who's bartending, and, you know, take it from there.
Okay.
Wow. So I try to give women voices.
Yes, you do. I love it. Gosh,
I like that a lot.
So this has been a gift to us. So.
Yes.
Oh, you're just the best. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Well, you take care.
Take care. We thank you.
You too. Take care of yourselves and your families. Yeah.
Okay.
And all blessings. Yeah.
All right. Same to you.
Take care. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. It was truly a blessing.
It was.
It was so much in it that I feel like a lot of women can get and can run with.
Yeah.
And I pray that you really take it, like I said, get this book, take it, read it, take your time. If you got to take notes and go through it and reflect on you as a daughter, as a mother, as a sister, a cousin, however you need to reflect on it, reflect on yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it. It's really good.
Yes.
And definitely go support her, please.
Yes.
She is truly a loving, lovely woman.
Yes, she is.
So until next time. Bye.